So, this is the first episode of something we're trying to do regularly, probably on a monthly basis or as subjects come up. Today's subject is going to be on the Netherlands. What we want to do is talk about global auto trends. I mean, we all know Tesla is not only an auto company, but we want to obviously keep an eye on the car industry and learn from other nations or other providers. We'll see whether there's anything to pick up. So regulars on this forum will be Alexander van der Ven. I'll present him in a second, and Jeff Lutz, you all know, and Larry Goldberg, you all know as well. So let me start with the people that you may not know. So our special guest today is Florian Minderop. He is Dutch, right, Florian? You're from the Netherlands by birth.
No, actually, I'm from birth. I'm Venezuelan.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're from Venezuela? Well, there you go. You're the
Yeah.
only Venezuelan who is called Minderop, I think, no?
Yeah. I've got Dutch parents and I'm raised Dutch. So, but my heart is in Venezuela as well.
Okay, well, perfect. So you are the co-founder of Mr. Green Electric Lease. We'll get into that in a second. That company has currently close to 5,000 Teslas in your European fleet. And obviously you have a lot of insight because you started that, if I recall it right, about 15, 16 years ago. So there's lots to share. And then we have with us also Alexander van der Ven. He's actually at the origin of this series. He reached out and said, you know what, Alexandra, we should do something a little bit more in depth on the car industry and, how it's different all over the world. He's always feeding me with lots and lots of good information. He was actually the co-founder of the first UK online car retailer early in the 2000s and is now the founder of a company called They are what is called a remarketing company. He's gonna explain to us. I think this is absolutely passionate and important for everybody to know what they are doing. And so he is also in a lot of initiatives that are linked to car distribution and how cars are actually getting to the end customer. He also wrote a book on the Model Y. He's going to tell us about that. And Alexander, you also lived all over the world, right? Netherlands, Germany, Costa Rica, the States, England, Spain. Now you're in Belgium. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Well, what's not correct, I didn't write a book about the Model Y. Model Y was a business plan, actually a copy of CarMax in the US. I became friends with the founder of CarMax. This is about, 20 years ago. And we started discussing about expansion to Europe, which at the end of the day did not happen because they wanted to become gold champion at home. Well, meanwhile, a lot of things happened, as we all know. So we never realized that.
I see. And so it was called Model Y because that was the project name and had nothing to do with the Model Y from Tesla. Is that what you're saying?
It was called Model Y because in the early days, CarMax started CarMax, they called it Model X. So I called the European alternative Model Y.
Ah, okay, I get it. Smart, smart. Okay. So, like I said, you're on the origin of, us giving this global auto trends space birth and making sure we get interesting subjects. Why did you think we should start with Europe? Why did you feel that Europe was a particularly good starting point?
Well, I saw your work, the work you do with all your other bulls on YouTube and on X. And I said, maybe it's a good idea to put some more international stuff in there because mostly it was, it used to be related to the US and in Europe, really EV adoption is like what Florian, I think it's 30% in Holland now. In Germany, it's like 15%. So Europe is actually ahead of the US. And that's why I thought it would be a good idea to join.
You sure did. So, and you obviously also wanted Larry here because Larry is, first of all, he's lived on 4 continents. He's a serial entrepreneur and he's obviously one of our best staples in the Tesla community. But he also has always a very wise view on all these expansions where people are doing things right and where people are too optimistic and should reduce a little bit their viewpoint. So thank you very much for joining us, Larry.
That's a pleasure, Alexandra. Always fun to be with you and with Jeff. And our two guests are really outstanding guests. They have insight that we could never get into the European car market, which is an extremely interesting car market from our perspective. and from Tesla's perspective. In many respects, Tesla are far behind in Europe. I mean, when you think about, even though the US EV adoption is well behind Europe, Tesla leads the EV space in the US, not by a little, but by a huge amount. Whereas in Europe, while Tesla is doing quite well, in fact, very well, it's definitely nothing like its lead in the United States or even its lead in China. But, at this point, Tesla's sales in the US eclipse even its sales in China and its sales in Europe, although Europe and China together exceed that of the US. So Europe is an exceedingly interesting market, and I think that it's a very important start for us.
It sure is. And that brings us to Jeff. So obviously, you know Jeff because he's my fellow cyber bull and always has his shoulder whenever I have any problems or any doubts on anything. He's just absolutely best research in the supply chain, in analysis of cost of goods sold, in all the little technicals that, if you've never been in manufacturing, if you've never made a product or been associated to making a product, you just learn every day so much more. And we learn so much from Jeff. So thank you, Jeff, for joining us. And I'm very honored because obviously you have worked in Europe, didn't you? I mean, I know you get your glasses from a German provider all the time.
I do. I've had teams in Europe. I have not, and I've been there many times, but I've always been stationed. I've not lived in Europe, but I definitely have had teams out there and have, worked in that economy and transacted and very interested in manufacturing and the flow of distribution out there and what's happening with the auto industry and price sensitivity and, Tesla's position there. I think Larry, spelled it out very well. And I think there's a number of things we can probably get into on this call I'm looking forward to. And I am appreciative of Alexander and with Spaces, he brings you closer. He brings you together with people you may have never been able to have a dialogue to ask a question, exchange information back and forth. And yeah, I think we're going to get some insights here that are going to be pretty special. And I'm just a vacuum for that. I love it. So appreciate it.
Perfect. Well, so let's get started. And I would like to first ask a question to Alexander, who sits in a very particular position. So maybe, Alexander, you first want to explain a little bit what's your current role in this whole car industry in Europe. I think that's important for our listeners to understand.
All right. So yeah, Europe is big. So I'm Dutch. I live in Belgium and we do business in 3 countries, Belgium, Holland, and Germany. What we do is since about 20 years, we buy young used cars, premium cars in the high price range, and we sell those cars to non-franchised used car dealers. Why non-franchised? Because number one, the franchise car dealers, they have a structural demand, the structural supply, excuse me, and the non-franchise car dealers, they do not have a structural supply like the manufacturers. So they are always looking for cars. And so that's it's not a niche because they're more non-franchise car dealers than franchise car dealers, which is consolidating both ways. In an earlier life, I was a director at the Automotive Fellowship based in the UK. This is a automotive think tank with 3 annual meetings, bringing together all the participants in the car industry from manufacturers, dealers, leasing companies, and all others, suppliers, etc. And then I had an earlier hobby in Barcelona at the IESE Business School, where I became friends with a professor who did annual automotive meetings. And it started with an invitation, and then I started helping him with these meetings. So I got more and more involved in the global, not only in distribution or wholesale, but the bigger picture of the industry.
So what part of your business, if I just want to sum it up, so you are purchasing either directly from manufacturers or from dealers to sell to other dealers, right? This is all business to business, correct?
It's all business to business.
Exactly. Okay. So what part of the current if you can share that 2023 trends, what portion of your trades is EVs compared to ICE or plug-in hybrids?
Yeah, varies. EVs, it's tiny, but take into consideration volumes went down in during the lockdowns. There were no cars or very few cars. So, but the trend is we buy more and more EVs. And what I also see is that legacy EVs, well, I think we all know that legacy EVs are, number one, they're too expensive as a new car, but they're heavily discounted today. Look at VW dealers in Germany tell their manufacturer these models are unsellable. So number one, what we see, so numbers went down, volume went down, now production is up again. And what I see happening, it's starting now, but I think it's going to escalate into next year, is that, production is up. Prices are still too high in Europe, way too high, MSRPs. So new car prices, and there's gonna be a disruption. And I'm wondering what Florian is gonna tell us about the impact of the Tesla price adjustments we saw earlier this year.
Perfect. So we're getting right into the subject. So Florian, now we're going to go to you. Maybe you quickly present what Mr. Green is. We'll get into the details a little bit later, and then give us, the reason why the Netherlands are, after Norway, Sweden, and Iceland, the number 4 front runner in the European states for EV adoption.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Alexandra. And it's an honor to be one of your speakers between Jeff and Larry and Alexander. Mr. Green is founded by me and my co-founder about 15 years ago. We are a mission-driven company. We are both economists as a study, and we're both bankers. And I was born in Venezuela, an oil-rich company. My dad always worked for the oil world, and I actually worked for an oil company as well. So I wanted to actually fight this industry and try to do something to better the world. So our mission is to end fossil fuels. We're a small company, but we're doing our best. And somewhere in 2008, we started our company, and we started with charging infrastructure. We set up a charging infrastructure along highways. We also did charging stations at municipalities. Then we started with cars, which were not available at that moment yet. And since 2013, the first Nissan Leafs came to the Netherlands, and we started leasing them out. So then we started our lease company. At this moment, we have around 5,000 cars in the lease. And as of end of 2013, we started to learn about Tesla, and we bought our first 50 Teslas. And I think we were the first company in the Netherlands and in Europe to buy Teslas. And we were very fortunate to meet Elon in 2014. We actually made a bet with him. And since then, we have been all in on Tesla, and we haven't stopped with leasing only Tesla. So at this moment, our 5,000 cars are for 99% Teslas. And I will explain you later on why that's the case.
Florian, it's Larry. Who won the bet?
We did.
Tell us about it.
Well, we were asked, he was opening a factory in Tilburg, which is in the south of and the line, the car's battery. He was there to open the factory. He also gave talk, and then we heard from the country manager from Tesla that he wasn't happy at all, because when he arrived at the place, he said, "Is this it? Is this the factory we're talking about?" He thought it was too small. And so we were not, oh shit, what are we going to ask him? He's not in a good mood. He already has all these questions. So why don't we just make a bet with him? So we said, if we make our sales targets, we were coming to the US, and with our whole team at that time, we were with 10 people. And we're going to drive from the Fremont factory to the Nevada factory with the Model S. And if we win the bet, we want the Model S supplied by you. And if we lose the bet, we will clean the sign of Tesla at this factory. So we won the bet. We went to the US, and we arrived at the Fremont factory. We did the tour, and then we asked, "Where's our Model S?" But nobody said, "We have no idea what you're talking about." And we called our country manager, and she said, "Well, I can't help you, but maybe I can give them a shout out." And then we eventually got a Model S. So we were happy. So that's a nice anecdote we had with Elon and with Tesla at the beginning.
So then you drove to Nevada and got a factory tour there?
No, it wasn't opened at all. So we came there, and it was a closed gate, and wasn't actually a lot to see. So we went on back to Lake Tahoe. We did some skiing. We had some fun. And eventually, 2 years later, we were invited to come to the opening of the Giga Nevada factory. So,
Yeah, I think I saw those
good.
pictures. And you also went to the Berlin opening, right? And you've been to
Yeah.
Austin since as well. Yeah, I saw those.
So
Perfect. Now, tell us a little bit about the Dutch market, because I mean, this is so astonishing. I mean, not that I think the Netherlands is a small country. As a German, I'm not allowed to say that. But what drove this early growth and this EV adoption?
Well, we started in 2008, and we were not the only ones who were thinking that electric transport will be the future. So there were a lot of companies coming to Amsterdam, and actually the municipality was a left wing municipality, and they were green. So they really liked the idea of giving people something which they would be happy with. So instead of punishing them, they could actually feel them like they will be like a very important person. So every inhabitant of Amsterdam could get a free parking permit and free charging and a charging station and a subsidy on the car if they bought an electric car. So
And that was when? That was what year?
that was around 2011, 2012.
That is progressive. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So that attracted a lot of other companies to the Netherlands. And that was the beginning. And then because of this small community, we also got a lot of people within the government looking at this, and they were actually pretty forward looking as well. And they were also car enthusiasts. We were happy with that. And they actually brought in fiscal policy where every car which was sold or driven by a company car would get a lot of tax benefits. It's called bijtelling in the Netherlands. But normally, if you drive in the Netherlands, you drive a company car. But when you drive a company car, you have to pay taxes as if the company car is like a wage. So the bijtelling is actually pretty high. But this government said, well, we want to promote electric vehicles, so we're going to give people who buy an electric car zero bijtelling, so zero taxes. And that's a substantial amount. It's about
Excuse me to interrupt. Is that the main reason why EVs are mainly corporate cars in the Netherlands and also in lots of other European countries?
yes. So from all the electric cars, about 60-70% are company cars.
It's amazing. I mean, that is crazy. And I mean, is that due to the fact that just taxes are so much higher in Europe so that the company car is actually a disguised increased salary? So that has become sort of part of the system. And lots of people have a company car, even though they're not really, in a position where they would need the car for their everyday job. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's correct. So for the employer, it's actually pretty great to give them a car instead of a wage because it's a lot less expensive. But for the employee, it's also very interesting because they get a car. The only thing they have to do is they have to pay some taxes on it. So that's why there are a lot of people in the Netherlands, and I think in Europe, I'm not sure about that. But
Yeah, sorry, this is Larry. I can confirm that approximately 50% of vehicles in Europe today, across Europe, are registered to corporate organizations.
that's true.
And do we see a kind of a bifurcation of if it's corporate owned versus personal registration in terms of what brand of EV they choose?
Can you explain your question once again?
I think I could jump in and answer that because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Alexander, but my understanding is that in Germany, there's a close relationship, and I'm speaking specifically about Germany. I want to talk about UK as well, but there's a very close relationship between the buying organizations and the major car companies, BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen, that there's, long-standing traditional relationships that make it very difficult in Germany, for example, for new auto companies to break into that particular marketplace, which is, almost in Germany, almost 60% of all cars. Is that correct, Alexander?
That is correct. And it's actually crazy because if you think about it, you have much less decision makers to advertise to or to convince, or in the other way that actually, if you're a new car brand and you
But-
want to get known, you're not actually addressing a whole market. You're addressing these corporate fleet managers because they're the decision makers.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the question is, does the corporation choose the car or does for example, I know that in Israel, if you work for a corporation, you get to choose your car and you actually do the buying and then the company does the actual paying. But it sounds like in Europe, there's more direct relationship between the corporation and the auto dealer. And, so Alexander may know a little bit more about that.
And certainly Florian, because that's his clients, right, Florian? You're working with these corporations that are then taking the Tesla from you.
Yeah, that's true. But the corporation market is also divided between small enterprises and big corporations.
Right.
So normally only the big corporations would give cars to their employees. But we see a trend that also the smaller companies are doing this. So what was your question, Larry?
Yeah. Who
Who owns
decides which
the
car to buy?
The reason we are doing small and medium enterprises is because the big fleets have what we call a fleet manager is always there for a long time. So he has a big relationship with the car manufacturer dealers. But the employee is able to choose for themselves. So it's not that the company is actually choosing it. It's the employee.
Right. That was my
What
question.
what
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have in the electric vehicle market is in the beginning, the only car which was able to actually compete with another with another ICE car was Tesla. So in the Netherlands and also in the rest of Europe, Tesla had a very big market share of the EV. But during the time, there were more competitors coming and they were coming at a lower price point. And Tesla wasn't producing yet in Europe. So what we have seen that in the Netherlands, the market share of Tesla has gone down in the last 2 years. But actually, this year, the market share has come up again immensely. So they had like a market share in the beginning of like 50, 60%, as you see in the US. Then they came down to like 5, 6% the last 2 years. And this year, they are coming back at 15, 20% again because the Model Y is produced in Berlin and because of the price reductions.
So, so what you're saying is that the Tesla pricing is now in line with the other cars and is once more competitive. But are large fleet managers buying from Tesla yet, or are they still not buying from Tesla?
Well, Tesla, as we have experienced, is a business to consumer company. It's not a business to business company. So everything is based to sell to consumers. They have learned that in Europe, the main customer is the business to business. So they are changing their strategy.
So how is that expressed? I mean, you have relationship with Tesla for now nearly 10 years. They obviously took you serious because you have now 5,000 Teslas, but you at the same time you're saying they're not a company really, good in business to business. So what were the challenges you experimented and what did you feel improved lately?
Well, it was also to our advantage because we were a small company. So we were able to do things differently. Other leasing companies were expecting to do business with a company who was already doing business to business. So, but one of the main things was that everything went through the client. So we every time we had to get information through the client instead of getting the information through us. If you understand what I mean. So everything was pushed to the client from invoices to updates to I don't know what. You can imagine everything around
Right.
that. And we actually thought, well, that's pretty interesting that we should build our company as if it's also a business to consumer company. So it was actually advantageous for us. We actually learned about that.
So you're changing the paradigm, you're changing the pattern, and now that Tesla is going to have to orient itself to business, will that change your business?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think Tesla is going to adapt as well to the market, especially right now where their car market is under pressure for giving some, not only lowering their prices, but also giving other features away. So they always said it doesn't matter how big you are, it doesn't matter how much orders you take, everybody's going to pay the same price. But I think that's going to change. I'm not sure yet. I haven't seen it yet, but I think that's going to change.
So they're going to have to compete with the fleet managers the same way as Volkswagen may compete with the fleet managers. So the bigger companies are going to get bigger discounts in the same manner as they would from Volkswagen or Mercedes. Is that the
I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but it's definitely looking like it right now. I mean, we are seeing discounts coming at certain moments that we know, okay, that's at the end of the quarter. They need to push some volume. So that's what we're seeing in the last few months. But they haven't done that until recently. So I think it's probably something it's for now. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few months and years, but they will definitely adapt, and they are adapting slowly to this different kind of market. But
That's actually surprising. I'm actually surprised that it took them so long because I mean the European market is what it is, especially in Germany, Holland, Belgium, but I also think in quite a lot of other countries now. So
Well,
how does this materialize in terms of money? I mean, obviously when you have a fleet manager in between and then a leasing rate at the end, when you had initially lease the car, let's say, for 500 euros per month, if you now suddenly have to deal with a fleet manager, is it the car maker that is lowering the price so that the fleet manager has a margin in there, or how does it change the financial?
well, there's a whole lot of things going on in the leasing market. You have captive companies, captive lease companies, and you have non-captive lease companies. You have bank leasing companies, for example. So that's the lease part. The leasing companies do have a big share of the corporate, the company market. So they actually buy the cars from Tesla or from the providers, and they get discounts, and then they give that discount into the leasing price. And
so
then the fleet owners, they can have a discount on the lease price if they buy a lot, if they lease a lot of Teslas from the leasing company. So that's a little bit how it works.
so
Tesla,
I had a question.
yeah, I'm just want to make sure I understand the layers here. There's a leasing company that will own the car and lease it. There's a fleet manager that will work for the corporation and will manage for the corporation which cars assigned to which employees and so on. So the fleet manager is not making any money. That's a salaried position for a corporation. The leasing company is the fleet is the owner of the vehicles, and they're leasing through the fleet manager to the employees of that company. Is that the hierarchy? Have I got it right, Florian?
yes, spot on.
So in that structure, you arrived on the scene. You started acquiring Teslas, and you were dealing directly with small businesses where the individuals are making the decision, and there wasn't a fleet manager. Is that the circumstance? And then how are you adapting to the current circumstances?
Yeah, so our first customers were entrepreneurs. So that was our end client. That was the
Yes.
decision. So that was pretty. They all drove a Model S and Model X. That was in the beginning years, and then after that, the Model 3 came. So that was actually the car for the employers, for the employees. Sorry,
Right.
that was actually easy sale because the employer was already driving a Model S or a Model X. So he was already on board. Now we're seeing that Model Y is a different car and is actually it's also different, it's more of a SUV. So it's obviously, it's the best selling car in Europe as well. So it's also selling outside of the company market. It's also selling in the private market. But that's how we sold into our clientele.
And the Model Y is selling into a private market. Are these professional people, self-employed people, retired people? What is the profile?
Oh, everybody's buying them. There's not a certain profile at this moment.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, I mean, I look at the Norway market, which is kind of the model for Europe, where EV adoption is over 80%, principally because, Norway was so aggressive, even more aggressive than the
Florian,
Netherlands.
Alexander, where
Sorry.
are your customers coming from? So, meaning, what other brands or models were they driving before leasing a Tesla?
Yeah, so Alexander, our clients from the Model S and Model X, they were obviously coming from the BMW, Mercedes, Jaguar, high-end markets, the A-class cars. And now with the Model 3 and Model Y, there are actually also people coming from lower classes because of the better TCO. But the TCO actually changed a bit last 2 years because of the higher electricity cost. So our electricity costs in the Netherlands actually doubled after the war with Ukraine. So that actually made the total cost of ownership a little bit less attractive. But no, our clients right now are driving everything you can imagine. In the beginning, it was the luxury cars, but now they're coming from every class and every brand. Larry, you wanted to ask about the market in
Yeah,
Britain?
I'm looking at the market in Norway where they've achieved over 90%, adoption. And I'm wondering whether Norway is a corporate market or an individual market, much like the rest of Europe, whether that was a influencing factor.
Flo, what
I
was
know that
the
Norway,
impact of the Tesla price reductions on the residual values? You are now leasing, you continue to lease the pre-owned Teslas. So is there a price decline or what's going on?
Sorry, I was listening to Larry, so I'm not focused on your question at this moment. Sorry.
but let's have Alexander's question because it was a question that is in my list to ask. It's a
Oh,
very interesting question. So, Alexander, you want to just repeat the question? Not sure Alexander's hearing me.
I don't think he hears me either. Alexander, can you hear me? I'm going to take him off. And Florian, maybe in the meantime, you can address Larry's question about Norway. Is Norway the same structure with lots of corporate cars, or is it different? If you know that. I mean, I don't know Norway that much. We just try to understand why Europe is so much ahead of the US, which obviously we like. And maybe it is that the US is just lagging so much. And let me deal with Alexander technically. I'm going to throw him out and bring him back in.
well, to give the answer to Alexander's question, why is Europe leading? I think it's because at first it was they started early. So Norway started very early.
And why is that? Is it because, I mean, Norway is an oil producing country, so petrol wasn't that expensive there, right?
No, but they are a very smart country. I mean, they use their oil proceeds to do a lot of smart stuff with it. And same incentives we had in the Netherlands, but they even had better incentives. So, for example, in Norway, you were able to drive an electric vehicle on the bus lane. There are a lot of bus lanes in Norway. They also put in place a lot of charging infrastructure ahead of everybody else. Just the same thing happened in the Netherlands. So it was like a chicken and egg solution. There weren't any cars coming to a country if there wasn't any infrastructure. So what did this both countries do to get ahead of the S curve is to put in charging infrastructure. So there was a lot of charging infrastructure put in place. There was a lot of subsidized charging infrastructure. And then all the people who were actually seeing the opportunity in the EV landscape were coming to those countries. So there were a lot of incentives in the beginning. There was a lot of progressive thinking already in the governments. And so that started at everything. So there was an ecosystem starting. And if you look at an S curve, Norway is just following the S curve. Just like Tony Siva says, it's highly predictable what's going to happen as long as you take the S curve into consideration. I think the Netherlands is just 3 to 4 years behind Norway. And Germany and Spain and Italy are like 2 to 3 years behind the Netherlands. But you see the adoption rate rising. And you also see the ICE sales plummeting. So it's a very nice curve where you have like a transition point, which is at 50%. And that's going to happen somewhere in the Netherlands in, I think, 1 year, 2 years. And then after that, the S curve is going to steepen. It's going to rise and it's going to accelerate the EV adoption, just what happened in Norway. And in Norway, actually, it's actually getting slower again, the adoption rate. But I think it's pure market dynamics, which is happening. And what happened in Norway and the Netherlands is that the governments were actually pretty early and pretty progressive because there were also left-wing governments who actually wanted to get rid of this climate change problem. So they were already putting these measures into place and they were already waiting for this kind of measures. These were actually what I said in the beginning. These were measures which were actually measures which were carrots instead of sticks. If you understand what I mean?
Right.
They could give away stuff which would make people happy instead of punishing them with you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't. No, you're if you do, we will make you a VIP. So that was the beginning of the ecosystem.
Well, what's very interesting about that observation is that the UK is, number 2 or number 3 in the whole of Europe in terms of adoption, after the Netherlands and Norway, which means that, there they have, right of center government, and yet they've also made those moves. So, but it speaks well for our IRA, that we've adopted here in the US.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the government should be left to have this
R-
rise in electric vehicles. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that they were, and the UK was also early with some very interesting. I don't know how they call it in the UK, but it was the same idea as the bijtelling in the Netherlands. If you bought an electric car there, you were also exempt of a lot of taxes.
Right. And do you do business in the UK or are you strictly in Europe, Florian?
Well, we were asked by Tesla to come over to the UK because they wanted to have a showcase. Said no, because it's a right-hand driving country. And we weren't sure that our residual values would be very good. But I think we made a mistake there.
You made a mistake by not going there, or you made a mistake by going there?
No, by not going.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should have a look into the UK market in one of the next episodes. I think it's very interesting case as well. But let's go back to the Netherlands. So today, obviously, your company is still growing a lot. You say you have about 5,000 Teslas. Now your goal is in about 2 years to get to 15,000. Is the big portion of those 5,000 all in the Netherlands, or is there already a second huge market? I know you do also have clients in Belgium and Germany. Is Belgium and Germany still small, or are they growing as quickly as the Netherlands?
Well, actually, Germany is growing very fast. We already have about 700 contracts in Germany, and we started a year ago. Germany is obviously a very big market compared to the Netherlands. I think Tesla is going to sell about 80,000 Teslas in Germany this year, compared to the Netherlands, which is only 20,000. So, and they just started in Germany. So we think that Germany is going to be a huge market, and France as well.
And do your clients typically come from EVs? Do you have that information, or is the Tesla they get from you their first car, their first electric car?
It's typically their first electric car.
Can we get Alexander back on because he has a question and if he's not able to ask the question, I'll ask it.
Alexander, can you hear us again and can you speak again?
Yeah, I can hear you again. I don't know what happened. I had a
Don't worry, that happens all the time. You're back here, so that's perfect. Do you remember your question?
Larry, do you remember?
Yes, it's about residuals, Alexander.
Yeah, okay. So the question for Florian was, what's the impact of the residual values of Tesla cars after the price adjustments?
Well, the market is not responding good. So the residual values are going down, and especially in the Netherlands, because due to the fiscal policy. So, for example, the Model F sold about 5 to 6,000 Model S's in 2000 and let me say it correctly, 18. So they were sold into a company lease contract, which had this fiscal policy. So all these cars are coming back at the same moment. So Tesla was able to deliver the cars in the last quarter of 2018. So all the cars are coming back out of the lease, and they're going to be sold by lease companies at this quarter. So there are like 4,000 Tesla Model S coming back to the market in the Netherlands. And next year, there are only coming 200 cars back into the market. So the market is responding to that because the supply is much bigger than the demand at this moment. So we see an extreme dip in the residual values, but that has nothing to do with the price reductions of Tesla. Of course, the price reductions also have an effect, but the effect of the price reductions is not as big as the supply, oversupply of the cars which are coming back out of the lease. If you understand what I mean?
Right. That's very interesting. But how is your firm going to manage that situation?
Well, it's also for us, it's a defining moment in our company history. We already knew that these cars were coming back. We also knew that this market would have this market dynamics, but it's always a hard moment when you're in the middle of the storm. But our strategy has always been to keep the cars. I mean, we started a lease company to buy Teslas, but we always said we want to keep the cars because the cars are going to be more valuable along the way. Everybody looks at Tesla as if it is a car, but we think it's a robot on wheels. And especially after 2019, we learned that the software, which was built for FSD, was actually getting better and better. We knew that we had gold in our hands. So we are never going to sell the cars. We are only selling cars which are not capable of hardware 2.5, which are not capable of actually awakening to a robotaxi. So for us, it's not very problematic. So what we do is that after the first lease, we actually put the cars into a second lease. And then we put them in a third lease, and then we wait until the robotaxi moment arrives. And we're not the only leasing company putting their cars into a second lease. It's actually getting more commonplace in the rest of the market as well, because people are seeing that the total cost of ownership of an electric car is actually getting better as long as the car is aging. So if you look at the dynamics of cost ownership, in the beginning of the first 5 years, the biggest part of the cost is actually depreciation. With a normal ICE vehicle, the biggest part is also depreciation in the first 5 years. But in the second 5 years, the biggest part of the total cost of ownership is fuel and maintenance. So when electricity prices are coming down again, which I hope in Europe, we will see total cost of ownership being very low for second-hand cars, for occasion lease. And everybody is awakening to that new world. So to answer your question, we're in the middle of the storm. The market is getting crazy. I sometimes have the idea that I live in two parallel worlds. One world where I see the advent of FSD coming and the promise, which is coming faster than we ever thought. We always thought that FSD will be available somewhere end of the 2028, 29. And now I think it's going to be earlier, going to be around 26, maybe 27, or maybe even next year. We have to see what happens. And on the other side, we have this market, which is actually completely losing their mind because there's a high interest rate. There's more supply than demand. There's like a completely different view on how they look at cars. It's still from a very conservative and very car type of way looking at a Tesla car. So that's the two parallel worlds where we're living in, and we're managing that. And we're having a lot of talks with our funders to explain what we're doing. And they understand that the residual value is actually not very interesting metric for our business because we are keeping the cars. And they say, as long as if there's a contract on the car, we don't have a problem. We understand what you guys are doing. It's actually the same as in real estate.
This is fascinating, Florian. So let me ask you a couple of questions. First of all, I think we should tell our audience where FSD is at in Europe, right? You're currently at the autopilot state, right? You don't have any of the FSD beta versions that we have here in the United States, correct?
Yeah, we call it FD Alpha version.
Which is that it works on highways, but it doesn't lane change and all that.
Yeah, so it works on highways. It does lane changes. It can see the lights. How do you call them? The street lights.
The
And
red
it can,
lights? Okay.
yeah, and it can see the stop signs.
Okay. So that's actually better than I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
So one very practical question. When you get back a car from a first lease, let's say you at least that at a monthly price of 500 euros, what is that car leasable as a second lease the next month? When somebody enters into a new, I guess, 2 or 3 year contract with your company, does those $500 drop down to 300 just to give us a feeling?
Yeah, you're about right. So if you lease a Model Y with us right now, the new Model Y with the reduced prices, you're actually looking at a price of 650, between 650 and 690 euros a month. That's for a 60-month lease period. But if you go for a second-hand Model S, which is a better car, you're actually looking at a price of 450 euros. And we think that next year we will be able to offer Model 3s at a price of around 390 euros. So under 400 euros. So that's better than a Volkswagen Golf.
That's fascinating. So the arbitrage is obviously something. And then do you have any issues with battery lives, with maintenance? At what mileage, or in your language, at what kilometers on the car do you get into issues where repair and maintenance costs for the Teslas become an issue?
Well, no, that was our whole idea of starting the company, that we thought after a few years of exploring this business is that we learned that the maintenance cost, it will be actually per kilometer basis will be very low, even with older cars, because there were so few parts. So that's the theory, there are fewer parts, so fewer maintenance. And now 10 years later, the data is proving it. The maintenance cost is not getting higher. Of course, it's getting a little bit higher because you have to do some extra maintenance than in the first 5 years, but it's not in the steep rising which you see in normal ICE cars. So that's the most interesting part of the whole business case, is that and especially with Tesla, I mean, they are built, the batteries is the most expensive part of the whole car. And of course, we had some issues, but those were with 2013, 2014 cars. It was the early cars. But the cars from 2015 to 16, we haven't had an issue at all. And
So can I just ask about that, Florian? When you lease a second-hand car, I take it these are to individual buyers, not corporations. Is that a correct statement?
no, the second are what we are seeing at this moment is that about 70% is still a company and 30% is private lease.
So that's fascinating. I mean, it's an amazing business. So now your second lessee, your
Yeah,
second lessee,
that's-
they pay the cost of maintenance. Is that correct?
what do you mean?
The guy who leases from you is responsible for maintenance, not you. Is that correct?
No, we are responsible for the maintenance costs. So we actually
Uh-huh.
do a full operational lease, which is like a subscription. You as a lessee, you don't have to worry about anything,
When
Including
we,
insurance as well, right?
including insurance, including repair, maintenance, including
These European clients, they're spoon-fed spoiled. There's no doubt about it.
yeah, it's a different. I mean, we understand a different thing when we talk about a lease. We're not talking about an operational lease. We're talking about a financial lease. You're talking about a purely operational lease.
exactly. That's a completely different beast. So a financial lease is just buying the car yourself, like just like buying a house and getting a loan on it. But with us, you're renting the house, you're renting the car.
So your whole business is about arbitraging the value of of the Tesla longevity against the market. You're long Tesla and short ICE maintenance.
Well, plus the
Yeah.
potential of FSD, because then you would sit
Well,
on the
that's the
biggest.
second. Even before that, they're long on Tesla and short on ICE from a maintenance
Correct.
perspective. That's amazing.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
only
I
man,
think sorry, with Tesla, you've got the longevity of that brand. Like they've built up to that reliability rating. A lot of these new, even legacy companies putting out their first EVs, they're just not going to have the inherent reliability. They're going to have their startup issues. And the Chinese brands I was going to ask about next, if they've penetrated the markets. But why don't you finish your point? Sorry if I interrupted.
yeah, I just wanted to add on what Larry said that I'm long on maintenance and short on ICE maintenance. We're also long on electricity going down cost
Mm.
and fuel going up in price. I mean, in Europe, we see a total different market right now, but that's because of the war. But I think in the long term, well, in the short term, electricity prices will rise because of the demand will actually outrun the supply. And we see a lot of supply issues also in the Netherlands already happening with the grid not being able to actually support it. But in the long term, I think electricity will have a zero marginal cost. So everybody who is getting more and more into alternative energy is actually not buying the energy anymore, but is actually becoming a producer of energy. So the car is actually going to be like a battery for their production of their electricity. They will become energy traders.
But
That's the
but
whole idea.
but your lease, your operational lease, does it include the electricity?
Not yet, but
I
that's
see.
that's what we want to do. So
So you haven't been hurt by the rise in the price yet, but you may be
no,
helped significantly by some future arbitrage on the energy.
no, but if we made a decision about a few years ago that we wouldn't become an energy supplier yet because we wanted to focus on the cars. But if we would have made that decision to become the energy supplier as well, we would have been even in a better arbitrage opportunity right now because we would have put in place solar panels and energy and batteries already at our consumer.
Right.
And
We would proactively hedged against what has happened.
well, I think if you look at my own case, in my own house, I have solar panels and I have my car, and I'm actually charging my car at a very cheap rate at this moment. I'm only paying about, I think, 15 cents if you amortize the cost which I've put on my roof. And if I pay at the public charger or at the supercharger, I pay like 50 cents a kilowatt. So at home, I'm already earning money.
Let me get to the next step, Florian. So
Sure.
your big bet, I mean, I see the smaller arbitrages, which must not be easy in this high interest rate environment because the people funding you, they must feel the pain. But the big picture obviously is once FSD in Europe is ready, you're sitting on this enormous robotaxi fleet. That's the big plan, right?
Yep, that's the big plan.
And so
That's
what would you do with all these robotaxis? Tell us about that.
well, I'm following you guys to tell me what's happening on that space. I'm following everybody to learn more about the business case, and I've been having talks with a lot of people about this business case. And every time I talk about it, it's actually looking more promising and more promising. I mean, business case, the numbers are just fascinating.
And do your Tesla drivers today use the FSD that is available? Do they pay for that? Is there an activation fee for them, or is that already in all of the cars that you are leasing out?
So before robotaxi happens, you will see also with Tesla themselves, you will see a business model where the cars are actually like just the hardware, and they will earn the money on the software licensing. So we're doing that in our leasing proposition. So we buy FSD from Tesla, and we actually lease it out for a variable price. And we give our customers education about FSD, and we tell them what the world will look like with FSD, and what the advantages are of FSD, of being more relaxed and more fun to drive, but also safer driving. And then they're able to actually lease it from us for an added fee of 35 euros a month. So we're actually giving them a subsidy on the leasing price, because if you normally would lease it from us, we would normally take on the depreciation, it would cost about 80 euros. But we want FSD on our cars because FSD will make the car more valuable in the future. So we want our customers to actually drive with FSD. And with them driving FSD, they will also learn about the whole concept of Tesla, that it's not a car, but it's a self-driving car. And that Tesla is actually building self-driving cars. And we see that those customers are actually more sticky than the other ones because they stay with Tesla and they don't trade in their Tesla for another electric vehicle because they understand what's happening. And there's still a lot of misinformation about FSD. There's still in Europe, the market is not understanding what is happening with FSD in the United States. So our business model right now is buying FSD, depreciating it, and collecting our first euros from it. And eventually we think that FSD will appreciate in value and in the coming years. So in Europe at this moment, we buy FSD for 7,500 euros. So that's about $7,500. But it's the same package as you guys buy in the US. The only thing is that it didn't have an over-the-air upgrade yet. And we don't have regulation in place yet. But we think the regulation will be in place somewhere or next year or beginning of 2025. So we are already banking on that future. And as of 2019, the first AI day where Elon presented his business model and his idea, we were awakened by the possibility and by the huge opportunity that lies in front of us. And not only for us, but for every entrepreneur out there. And that's what we actually want to do. We want to inspire other people to learn about the opportunity. And I've been very fortunate to learn that there are a lot of other entrepreneurs within the world who are actually banking on the same idea. I just spoke to some people who bought Cybertrucks, and they want to lease them out in the United States, and maybe we're going to partner with them. So it's very intriguing to see and very fun to learn about all the possibilities, and people are really awakening to the reality which is coming within maybe 2, maybe 1 year. Nobody knows. Maybe one of you can tell.
We wish we could, I can tell you. We're all
Yeah.
waiting for it. One question that comes to mind now that you said about that is that, what do people do at the end of their lease? So you said those that have used Alpha FSD in Europe, they're more likely to ask for a new Tesla. Do people usually stay on EVs? Do you lose them then? Because obviously you have a 99% Tesla fleet. What is the rate of people not wanting to renew their Tesla?
Well, the biggest problem is fiscal policies. So people stop with their Tesla after 5 years. They love their car, really want to drive in their car, but they have to pay a substantial bigger amount to drive the same car. So we actually have a pretty high churn at this moment. People are actually stopping, but that's because that's the early people. So the people from 18, which were also driving their cars because of fiscal reasons. So We're losing them to petrol cars again. We're losing them to other leasing companies, which is also pretty normal. And sometimes we're losing them to other EVs as well.
And that's probably where we get the questions from Jeff. So do you see them moving to what? Cheaper models, Chinese models, more high-end models? What is the, what pulls a client from a Tesla EV to another EV company?
Well, the Chinese haven't arrived. Well, they did arrive in the Netherlands and Europe, but they haven't got big numbers yet. But I would definitely see a trend that they will start to switch to them. But that's just pure speculation. That's not data. That's not facts. So I've no idea yet if they're going to the Chinese.
Is
At
the
this moment,
pricing different? Is the pricing meaningfully different, Florian, between the Chinese and the Tesla models available?
no, it's they are not. I mean, I don't have the numbers really by head, but it's still very small. In some brands, they are under the hundreds. So it's not a market at all yet. It's not something people are talking about. I went on the streets yesterday and I saw my first Neo, my first.
So what makes you think that there could be a transition to the Chinese EV brands once they're available in supply? My theory is I think they're going to struggle to localize from a software and from a service and services perspective. I think they're going to struggle with that. Not saying it's insurmountable, but they don't have a backbone of a bigger operating system like Android to kind of take care of that for that, where they can just really focus on the hardware. So you said you could see a transition to Chinese auto is there a reason why?
I'm in line with your thinking. I actually had a neighbor of me. He went out to the first Seeker. That was like last month. And he said, I was completely shocked how bad the software was. It was like sitting into a Volkswagen. No, it was. So I think you're right. They are not ready yet for the European market at the software level.
Okay.
So who do you
Interesting.
consider a worthy competitor for EV?
So at this moment in the Netherlands, if you look at the data, Volkswagen is still doing good. The Kia is doing good and the Renault is doing good. But all those cars are at a price point, which is a completely different class of cars. So those cars are like 20,000 euros cheaper than a Model Y or a Model 3. But it's a different class of cars. So it's normal that they sell more. It's when you get into a lower class, you actually sell more cars. But if you look at it relatively, Tesla has a very high market share also in Europe. It's around, well, in the Netherlands, it went from what I said, 60% to like 20%, which was also globally. Then it went down to 10 the last 2 years, but that's because everybody was anticipating the Model Y, and then the Model Y came and then it was too expensive. And now everybody knew the price cuts were coming down. And now they are at 20% again, market share. So they are still the clear leaders also here in Europe. But of course, in Europe, everybody is known by the European brands. So there's still a lot of push from those brands. There's also a lot of advertising from those brands. If you look at everywhere there's advertising around electric cars, but you never see advertising from Tesla. And still Tesla is the clear winner.
So that raises the perennial question that we have on these spaces. And that is, what is your view on Tesla's need to advertise in Europe?
Well, I would be very happy with it, of course, because that would help me as well. But I think I'm on the camp which think it's better to lower the prices than advertise, because for us it's also better to have to buy a cheaper car than to have advertising. I mean, there's hard euros. So I'm on the camp of Elon's camp, and it's long term. The only thing you need to do is become if you want to be the leader in the field, you have to be the most competitive. So be as cheap as possible. That's the number one driver for buying a car.
Well, indulge me a little bit, and let me say that right now Tesla have got 4 classes of car. They have the Model S, the Model X, the Y, and the 3, and each represent a particular class of car, which has traditionally had a certain TAM, a certain total addressable market. But they've stretched that traditional addressable market way beyond where it was, because they've attracted a much larger following for that class of car than the other manufacturers had. And that's because of the halo around the brand. On the other hand, the only way to expand the TAM much further than it is now, that it's getting to now, is with a new class of car, and that would be the next generation platform. But until that next generation platform comes, they have to expand the TAM further in order to continue to grow. Would advertising not be an adjunct or an additional method of expanding that TAM in these circumstances?
Yeah, well, I'm not the expert in this field, and I also follow these discussions on spaces and everywhere. But as I said, I think what they're doing is correct. And it's not that they're not doing marketing at all or advertising. They have a lot of events. It's just different kind of advertising, different kind of marketing. It's actually pretty data driven how they do it.
Yeah.
So it's not the traditional way of advertising. And I think that's actually, and I mean, they are mission driven. They are against everything, or they want to disrupt everything that's actually has to do with traditional car
Mhm.
selling and all the negative effects of it. And they don't want to participate in it. I think it's more of an ethical thing than a strategic thing.
Oh, I agree with you. It's a religion. But that's
Yeah,
another subject. I mean, I think we should get to the last aspect of EVs, which is charging. So in the Netherlands and in the other European countries, are the Tesla superchargers already open to competitors? And is that do your clients complain about that, or is that not an issue?
yeah, it's already open to competitors. And no, I haven't heard anybody complain about it. I mean, the only superchargers I visit are the Tesla super, and I actually don't see that many other cars. I'm actually happy that they're there, and it's not a problem at all. I see a lot of cab drivers at these kind of charging stations. So no, it's not. It's a non-issue.
And how is the charging network overall, Tesla and non-Tesla? Is it easy to charge now everywhere in Europe, or is there still range anxiety happening? What's the current state of there?
Well, in the Netherlands, it's perfect. It's amazing. There's no range anxiety at all anymore. Only in the heads of people. I'm currently in Spain. I'm doing a road trip here, and I'm following the Tesla superchargers. Spain is still a little bit of a desert. That we've been driving with Mr. Green every year. We're doing road trips to show everybody that possible. I've been driving through the whole of Europe, all on superchargers. I've been to the north of Norway, to the I've been to the mountains in Switzerland. We've been to Poland. To no, it's on superchargers. It's not a problem. The other chargers are getting better and better, but it's still such an advantage that you have the software connected with the car to the charging, and you have the whole user experience is so good. I never go to another charging station because I'm in a Tesla.
What about the reliability of the competitive charging stations? Here in the United States, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
One out of two literally don't work, and I've done statistics on this. Is that the case in Europe?
No, it's not as bad. And as I said, it's getting better and better. But it's not as reliable as the Tesla superchargers. But it's definitely not as bad as in the US. And there are a lot of companies who are completely focused on giving the charging experience, and they're doing very well. We actually sold our charging business, which we had for 8 years. We sold it to Fastnet, and Fastnet is a Dutch company who is expanding to the rest of Europe. You have a Danish company, Clever, which is very good. No, there are a lot of supercharger providers which are actually doing a very good job. And we're also seeing that all those type of companies are actually making money now as well. They're not making money they're not making net margins yet. They're still making losses, but they're making good gross margins already. So it's also showing that it's a real business case as well.
What is the speed of charging on non-Tesla chargers in general on the highways, on the freeways in Europe?
Well, it's the same as Tesla. I charged today at 1700 kilometers an hour. So it was amazing fast.
Very good.
Good. I mean, I absolutely love this discussion, Florian. Thank you very much. I really hope you get to your 15,000 Teslas before robotaxis are available, because then you are the king of the hill, right? Oh, no, there's no hill in the Netherlands, but nearly the king of the hill. I'm just joking, or trying to joke. But thank you very much for joining us today and explaining that. I think would be interesting to have next month somebody from the UK, because they have a little bit of a different evolution, and yet they're not far away from you. And then obviously Asia and other continents. I hope we can keep that up. Thanks to Jeff and Alexandra and Larry for helping me with this. And see you all soon.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.